parked in front. There are people inside.
Simon, I'm curious about how you would sort of classify this storm and what you've seen so far. You've got experience dealing with hurricanes and extreme weather. How does this compare to what you've dealt with in the past?
So we're not in the right front quadrant with respect to the storm motion. So we're not in the highest winds compared to Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Katrina. It's very similar to both of those. And also, we can also tell that the vortex structure of the hurricane is ever so slightly tilted because on radar is not matching up perfectly what we're seeing at the ground level. So at the ground level, the vortex is a little bit lagging.
You're gonna have to explain that to those of us who don't know what a vortex structure is.
Okay. So the center of the hurricane, it's a giant vortex, and a lot of hurricanes it'll be straight up and down. So what you're seeing on radar is happening directly above you,
right,
all the way down to the surface. This is ever so slightly tilted to the northeast. So what we're seeing on radar as it's coming towards us, we're not actually feeling it until a little bit later, until like a few minutes later.
So you said you're hunkered down for a little bit here now, right? You're in a safe place, and this is where you plan to stay for how long?
No, we're on the move. We're driving around in this storm, and I'm not sure how long we're going to be driving around. We're just driving around. We're on a pretty safe route right now, and with respect to the wind, we're like pretty much staying parallel to the wind, so nothing's blowing at us horizontally. Wow. There's just straight road in front of us, so we're not having debris coming at us, and the wind is either at our back or in our faces.
All right, well, we'll stay safe, obviously. I know you're an experienced professional, but every official we've talked to, Aaron, has said, stay inside, don't do what Simon's doing because he's a storm chaser. Yeah, but anybody else, don't go outside.
Just too dangerous. We are going to have much more coverage on Hurricane Ian and the damage it's causing right after a short break. Stay with us.
About 233, 236.
As we look out over the latest city-turned-crime scene, we see the things left behind. Back now with our NBC News exclusive.
Now Tonight with Joshua Johnson, streaming weeknights at 8 on NBC News Now.
You get one beautiful life to live. Jenna doesn't stop till it's sold. We have this circle of women that love each other. This is a moment we're in right now. This is really electric. Love ya. I love you too.
This is it. Live from Ukraine, from Uvalde, Texas, from Mayfield, Kentucky, to cover news, you have to be in it. This is how so many towns and cities are protecting themselves. You can actually see they're pushing the gates open. Was there a school officer on campus? That's what we've been told. No. Do you remember any tornado as bad as this one? You look at this and you're thinking, we're not going to have power for weeks, if not months. Exactly. Every night, it's your news playlist.
Top Story with Tom Yamas. Weeknights at 7 on NBC News Now.
It's the best time of the morning time. Pop Start, baby.
I'm feeling the vibe today on the show.
Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers right now on Morning News Now.
We're staying on top of the breaking situation in Ukraine.
We're watching dangerous heat this week. Recession, I mean, is that where we're headed? Is there any way to avoid that?
Morning News Now, streaming weekdays at 7.
Internal Affairs, the new podcast from Dateline. Listen now.
Morning, Al.
Morning, Cal.
Good morning. Welcome to Today.
I love mornings. They're full of possibility. And how you start your day sets the tone for the whole day.
We need to pull up one extra chair at the table.
We feel like we're right there with you.
Just ahead in this half hour, we're going to introduce you to...
Because every day we start our morning so you can take on yours.
These days, it feels like the news never stops. So let's get into it. What's happening right now, what it all means for you for an hour every day. It can be hard to keep up, so let's get started together.
Hallie Jackson Now, weekdays at 5 on NBC News Now.
NBC News, streaming free now.
Hallie Jackson Now, weekdays at 5 on NBC News Now. hits.
This one historically is going to be way over the top. It's time to hunker down and prepare for the storm.
Here now, Kate Snow and Aaron Gilchrist.
Good day. We're coming on the air with special coverage of Hurricane Ian. The predictions that you just heard, unfortunately, are coming true. Ian made landfall a short time ago. I'm Kate Snow.
And I'm Aaron Gilchrist. It was a powerful Category 4 storm. It's causing damage really all along the west coast of Florida right now. It is not accustomed to major hurricanes like this, that area.
And it was about an hour ago that it made landfall near Fort Myers, Florida. It is cutting northeast now through the Sunshine State, but very slowly. Meteorologists and first responders are stressing the situation is dire. Storm surge is projected to be historic. We're already seeing flooding across several different cities. It is potentially life-threatening.
And keeping the lights on is another major concern at this hour, really, again, across the state of Florida. Right now, more than 800,000 customers without electricity. That's according to poweroutage.us. The National Weather Service describing the storm surge there, the wind, the flooding, all these things coming together, being described as catastrophic.
And just to mention, when we spoke to Lee County, the Fort Myers area, we spoke to an official there just a while ago who said there are calls for rescues coming in for search and rescue, people trapped even in their attics on some of the barrier islands. And right now, the storm is still there. They can't get to those people. They can't go out.
Let's turn to Sam Brock now. He is near Sarasota, Florida for us today. And the conditions where you are, Sam, they look like they've gotten worse.
Yeah, Aaron, Kate, it's good to be with you. This has definitely changed quite a good deal since we last spoke, maybe 30 or 40 minutes ago. This is State Street in downtown Sarasota. You know, it's weird and it's eerie to be walking down the street right now. Where normally, I come here regularly, see people buzzing everywhere, and now it's just obviously empty. But what we're seeing now that we were not really until about an hour ago are intervals 80 to 90, maybe triple-digit wind gusts. As I walk around here, you'll see the trees swaying over my shoulder, the street signs on the corner. We're bending at one point. Not right now. I'm looking at garbage cans floating back and forth in the streets. Now, we're not seeing a storm surge at street level yet. However, what we are observing is a lot of calls coming in, according to Sarasota officials, for help. And those folks cannot receive it because they've already hit the threshold. We did a couple of hours ago at that 45 mile per hour or higher wind level gust. They can't get out there. So you have some portion of people here who are told to evacuate, who thus far not. And now this is no man's land. You have nowhere to go except to hunker down. The advisory from Sarasota was to make sure you're in the interior part of your home, away from windows. As we're seeing again, those gusts get very high. And Governor DeSantis, we are expecting to brief you guys in less than an hour. As he's already said, there's 5,000 plus National Guardsmen at the ready when they can. National Guardsmen at the ready when they can. Let me send it back to you.
All right, we'll keep an eye out for that briefing Sam brought for us. Sam, thanks.
Let's go a little north to Tampa, and Morgan Chesky is up there. Morgan, I know last few times we've seen you, it hasn't been too intense. It looks like it's still not too intense, but it's headed that way.
Yeah, Kate, you're absolutely right. And this is the story with this storm, is that as it's making landfall, those outer bands have kind of made their way across us, but the intensity is picking up, certainly not to the degree that we're seeing where it made its first contact on the coast. But the unfortunate tale of Tampa will be that the worst is going to happen under cover of nightfall. Anywhere from 9 to 12 o'clock tonight is when they're expected to get potentially hurricane or Category 1 hurricane winds, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. And as this only picks up, it's going to be dropping an incredible amount of rain, 12 to 24 inches over the next 2 days. That's why the mayor of Tampa has stated again, if you've already evacuated, do not come back. It is not safe to return home right now, even though they're not going to be taking a direct hit from Hurricane Ian. And so right now, the word going out, stay safe, stay hunkered down, because unfortunately, we're still hours away from really seeing what Ian's biggest impact is going to be in this community. And we're already hearing reports of flooding in low-lying areas. You couple that with the fact that we've seen stunning images of Tampa Bay with that water pulled away from the shoreline out into the Gulf. The city officials said what goes out must come back in. That's going to be in the form of storm surge tonight and incredible amounts of rain. Kate?
All right. Thank you so much, Morgan Chesky.
Let's turn to NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns now for a little more on the reality that we're dealing with here, Bill. And I think Morgan and Sam together have really painted a good picture of what is to come. Obviously, we know it's been about an hour since this hurricane made landfall, but it's not done. There's a lot more rain to come. There's a lot more storm surge to come, right?
If I had to put like a percentage on it, I'd say maybe 50-60% of the damage from the storm has been done. That still leaves us with the other half still to go. That will go up into the Orlando area later tonight with tree damage and power outages. The storm itself, the eye, your break is over with in Captiva and areas here around Pine Island because the backside of the storm's coming through. As the eye moves inland, you're in clearing for a while, and now this backside band, this bright red band, is the backside of the storm that's going to have wind gusts 100, 120 mile per hour winds. So, you get the front side, and then you go into the calm of the eye, and then you have the roaring train-like sound returning on the backside. Unfortunately for our friends from Naples all the way up to Bonita Springs and to Fort Myers, the eye's going north of you. You really didn't get a break. You're not getting a break. So these people, a lot of people, they don't have power. There's water everywhere right now. We know we've had at least 6 to 8 feet, maybe higher in this region. And here comes all the heavy rain and the high winds again now because you're going through the southern side of the storm, and then you're going to go through the southwest quadrant, which has the highest winds of anywhere in the storm. So your damage is not done yet, sadly. So, that was the fear going in, is areas about 10 to 20 miles south of landfall is where I said the worst storm surge will be. We had the landfall on Cayo Costa at 305, 150 mile per hour winds. And by the way, the latest update here at the top of the hour, we're now at 145. So we're going to slowly weaken this thing through the night, but not fast enough. That's exactly Hurricane Charlie. Exactly. This little barrier island, the exact same spot in 2004, Category 4 Charlie made landfall in the exact location. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. That's just for the history books, though. To the south, this is where I have grave concerns, the Bonita Springs area, all the way up here through southern portions of Fort Myers and towards the coast. I mean, that's where I think the worst of it was. So let me take you through some other maps here and show you kind of where we go from here with the storm. Here's our wind gusts. We did have at the Punta Gorda Airport 123 mile per hour wind gusts. We showed you where our reporters are located. In Tampa, 64 gusts. Sarasota, 68. So you see the difference. That's like minor damage. Some trees are going to fall, some power outages, maybe a gas station awning. And then when you get down here to 123, that's when you're talking structures. That's when you're talking well-built roofs are even going to struggle. And we mentioned the storm surge. Again, that's where the landfall was, south of there. So Marco Island, Naples, Bonita Springs, Fort Myers, that's where the peak storm surge values are occurring, and especially there between Bonita Springs and Fort Myers. And then we'll fast forward a little bit through the maps here, and we're showing the possible inundation maps. Here's the path of the storm and what we're going to do. These are the max winds we expect. So we still have damage to go. I mean, we're not, as I said, we're only about halfway done with the damage that this storm is going to do. All the way up here to Lakeland, all the way Orlando, we're now predicting your max gusts, maybe 50 to 70 mile per hour range. That's enough to knock power out, enough to knock some tree branches. A lot of old trees in the Orlando area, a lot of old oak trees. And then as we go throughout tomorrow, we're going to be talking about heading up towards Daytona Beach in that area with a little bit of problems with storm surge in the St. Johns River, St. Augustine to Daytona Beach, all the way to New Brunswick, Amelia Island, heading up towards Hilton Head in that area. It's not going to be horrible, but you're going to have some issues and some minor problems, especially if it occurs at high tide. And here's a big view, guys, kind of our storm. There's been a lot of lightning with this too, and you've probably seen some stories and pictures of that. It's a very brutal storm. We haven't had a lot of reports of tornadoes today. Some tropical systems produce a lot, some don't. Yesterday we had a bunch. So far so good today on that front, and our watches and warnings. About 21 million people. I mean, it's pretty incredible that we go all the way up the coast here, and there's still even hurricane watches in effect from Charleston to Savannah down through Jacksonville. It won't be like what's happening now, but pay attention to this. Areas like Charleston and Savannah are extremely flood prone. It doesn't take much. They're going to have a lot of heavy rain, and they're going to get a little bit of storm surge on top of that. So that's some of the stories we'll be watching in the days ahead. But our thoughts and prayers right now are with all the people there. As you mentioned in Lee County, we know we have people trapped. They would like to be rescued. It's not safe for the Coast Guard to get up there in their helicopters. Not safe for the National Guard to get up there and do rescues. And unfortunately, by the time the winds come down, it'll be overnight. It'll be dark. So it's going to be even very difficult for those crews to get out there then. So some people may be trapped in their homes, no power, water up, in through their living room. They may not be able to get out till tomorrow.
You know what's striking to me, Bill, is that you showed a map. It's all of Florida, essentially. I mean, there's no
Stephen,
part,
go back and
there's
show
no
the
part
wide
of
view of the
Florida
storm.
that's not touched by this storm.
I mean, we had a tornado that touched down near Hollywood, Florida, at the airport, and there were airplanes that were flipped over and tossed. And that was last night in a tornado. So, yeah, it hasn't been. I mean, Key West reported one of their top 5 ever storm surges. Naples reported their highest storm surge ever. This is the 4th strongest storm ever to make landfall in Florida, and it tied for 5th for the 5th strongest storm ever to make landfall anywhere in the U.S. So we're not hyping this.
Yeah.
When you see the pictures in the days ahead, there's going to be a lot of people in need of a lot of help. We got thousands and thousands of people that are going to be going and trying to get back to their homes, and they're probably not going to like what they see when they get there.
Bill Cairns, thank you.
We are joined now by storm chaser Ben McMillan. He's in Punta Gorda, Florida, where conditions have been deteriorating. Ben, your experience dealing with these things, how bad are conditions getting where you are?
Well, your meteorologist just said it. It's not done yet. It's extremely windy here still in Punta Gorda, and you can just see there's trees snapped. There's pieces of the roofs of these buildings that are coming apart. It's like a war zone. We're hearing explosions. We're hearing crashes. And let me tell you this. This is the biggest problem. There's pieces of debris everywhere, and they're just getting picked up by these winds, and they become missiles. So for anyone trying to be out here, this is why the governor of Florida tells you to evacuate. This is why local first responders can't respond, because it is like a war zone. They have constant pieces of debris that could be hurting themselves, hurting their vehicles, and it's just not a safe situation. And here in Punta Gorda, we actually will be entering the eye of the storm. That is where the lowest pressure is very short here, and there will be a sense of calm that may overtake the area. That's an area where the winds are much lighter than what you see that I'm standing in now. I want people to know that's not a sign the storm is over. The backside of the eye will eventually move in and have just as strong, if not stronger, of winds as the first part of the eye. So it tricks a lot of people. We want them to keep here with you for the latest information and make sure they know exactly what the storm is really not for real.
Ben, this is Kate. I just wanted to ask, because earlier today, Carrie Sanders, our colleague, was near where you are and was showing us how the water had all left and was going out toward the ocean, out toward the Gulf. Is it coming back in?
Yeah, let's take you out to the marina right now. If you can bear with me, guys. We'll have our photographer show you a shot here. And it appears like there's still no water in the bay. So what an amazing sight, guys, to see a completely waterless bay. Look at all those boats out there with just nothing but mud around them. That's just the power of the storm, the power of science, and all that water being pushed out. But like the people at Tampa said, eventually that will return. And in Punta Gorda, that could be sooner than later. So we want folks, if they are in a low-lying area, to still take those precautions with storm surge. Storm surge, one of the deadliest killers in hurricanes, and make sure you don't get caught off guard.
And you know, as we look at these live pictures behind you, and like you, we are marveling at what has happened with the water in that area. For folks who are not familiar with the west coast of Florida, and you know, if you need to go, you stop us. We'll stop asking you questions as I watch the wind blow there. For folks who aren't familiar, help orient us a little bit as to where you are in relationship to Fort Myers and your proximity to the Gulf Coast. I know there's a sound and a river that meet where you are, right?
Yeah, Charlotte Harbor is just to the north of the Fort Myers area, and unfortunately Fort Myers is on the south side of the storm. It's underwater. Much of it's underwater right now. So as the storm lifts, that surge, that southerly flow pushing the water up into the Charlotte Harbor area will eventually start to fill that area you just saw moments ago, and those boats will start to come back up. All right, bear with me, guys. We're getting another gust.
Yeah.
Okay.
Incredible power out here. And I want to show you, just look at, I'm surrounded by debris. This is just so intense. This is a storm that's going to be in the history books for a long, long time for people in Florida.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Ben, but I want you to be safe. So go ahead and take cover. Thank you for being with us, Ben McMillan.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
All right, let's go to Mike McNeese now. The Marco Island city manager is joining us on the phone. We understand the worst of the wind has passed in that area, but the water is still rising. Is that the case from what you're seeing?
Yes, that's correct. And we were fortunate in that we didn't get the worst of the front end winds. We missed the 100-mile-an-hour plus winds, so and the storm and the eye as well passed us. So we're at the back end of the winds. We had a high tide here just a few minutes ago, and waiting to see now whether we continue to get rise or we get any relief as the tide goes out. Our expectation is that we're going to still see some surge through at least another tide cycle. So it's all about how much more water are we going to get.
So you're Marco Island. I've been there. It's a beautiful place that people go vacation to. What is the water situation like? Have you had rising water there?
Oh, yes. Our streets are pretty much all underwater to some degree. We're not advising anyone to try to go anywhere. There's no travel on the island. To some degree, the streets at this point are indistinguishable from the canals. So we're now dependent upon some relief from the water before we can even get out and start to bring back electricity and those types of things.
Do you have any idea exactly how many people? I know there were a lot of places that evacuated as the storm was coming in over the last couple of days. Do you expect that there are a lot of people who may be stranded in their homes who didn't leave the area before today?
I don't have any kind of hard count, but I am certain there are a lot of people who did not evacuate. We've tried to help some out who had maybe some encroaching water into their yards or close to their homes. But yeah, we know we have people in their homes, and they're going to be fine there. Winds are going to subside and have begun to subside somewhat, but I don't have any idea exactly how many.
You say they're going to be fine, but will they have flood damage? Are you concerned about that?
Well, I'm sure there will be significant flood damage out there. We don't have any preliminary assessment whatsoever. We know there are some structures that have flooded, but until we can get out a little better, we don't really have any idea how many.
And that's not going to be until when? Tomorrow at best?
We certainly don't expect it to be before dark today. We have some high water trucks that we can put out, but we were really not able to do much of an assessment until the water goes down somewhat. So yeah, I think best case it would be sometime tomorrow, unless we get some relief from the next tide cycle, tide going out right now, more than we're expecting.
You know, we've been getting some of the historical data around this storm in the last few minutes. We know Hurricane Ian is likely to be one of the top 5 strongest storms to hit this area.
To make landfall in the U.S.
To make landfall in this country. And we've seen so much about the storm surge that's been anticipated. I'm just curious, how that reality sinks in for you at this moment. And I know, obviously, you have people that you have to be more worried about, but this is going to be historic in terms of what it does to your community and the communities that surround you.
Well, wind-wise, I think we've seen this before, but talking to people who have been on Marco Island a long time from a water standpoint, from a surge standpoint, nobody can remember it being quite this bad. So, we'll see whether it keeps rising and do a full assessment when we can get out there. But, yeah, there's no question this has been a very serious event for us.
All right, Mike McNeese, the Marco Island City Manager, we appreciate your time and we wish you the best.
Yeah, good
You
luck.
bet. We appreciate it.
Let's go to Ali Velshi. He's sort of across the water from Marco Island. He's in Naples on the mainland on the coast of Florida. But right now it doesn't really look like land. It looks like a lot of water, Ali.
Yeah, it definitely looks like an island. In fact, there's water as far east as you can see. This is the land side. This is not the water side that you're looking at. You're seeing flooding. I will tell you this. In the last hour or so, we've seen some receding, and that's largely because we passed high tide at about 3:20 p.m. Now all you've got is actual storm remnants. We were dealing with high tide and storm, but you can see that the water is still at about the 4-foot level or so, and it has moved a number of cars. Those cars were all lined up, parked properly, and they've just all bunched up. Let's take a look over this side. I'm going to ask Randy to go over this side. This is what the water looks like. It's still incredibly rough, and it's still pushing. It's still a surge, and it's still pushing water in. But if Randy goes down and takes a look at this waterway, what you see on the right side is water that's pushing in, but then you'll see after a few seconds, it starts to be met by water that's pushing back out. It's going from the left to right. See a little of that. We've not seen that in hours and hours and hours. So you're getting to some level of equilibrium where the water level in and around Naples is coming down. However, there are more than 1 million people across this state that we know of that are without power. In the 7 counties in this area alone, about 750,000. So it's got to be more than that, and more to come, because this is such a slow-moving storm that it dumps a lot of water, and street poles and trees loosen up, and then with the wind they come down, not only taking power lines down with them, but really just making it difficult for emergency services to get out, and making it hard. Of course, trees falling is dangerous. So that's where we are in this thing. We're probably just getting past the worst of it. There's still the back end of the storm that is working its way through the west coast of Florida, and then we will start to see what the damage is and how it recedes. But it's still going to be a very, very difficult several hours and overnight for residents of western Florida, and then moving east through to Orlando and Jacksonville and points east.
Allie, I wonder, there are other cities that have called for curfews. They don't want people to go out all night tonight. Are you hearing anything from Naples authorities?
Well, we first of all got a shelter in place, so it's not even don't even move around your house, basically. They've told people, go to a central place in your house behind secure walls. Can't go anywhere. You can't drive in this. At 6 inches, your car can float away. We are now talking about feet and feet of water. We've seen cars that have been moved around. There's nowhere to go, and you can't walk, by the way. I tried doing that earlier, too. It's too deep, and there's hazards in the water. So I don't know. I haven't heard if there's an official curfew. We are in an official evacuation zone, but it's mandatory evacuation. But all it means is that if you stay, you can't rely on help from the authorities. So authorities have made it clear they can't come out to help anybody. So just stay where you are until this passes.
All right, Allie Velshi, thank you.
Let's head north now. Sam Brock is for us in Sarasota, Florida, for us again now. And Sam, we were having a little trouble hearing you earlier. I think we can hear you now. And you were sort of helping us to understand the conditions. Even though you're in one of the more northern areas, the conditions have still been deteriorating despite the fact that this storm came ashore so far south of you.
It's gotten bad. There is no question, Aaron. And really, just to kind of add some to what Ali was just talking about, you see these wind gusts have really been approaching triple digits. What he was discussing with respect to emergency responders and police officers and sheriff's deputies not being able to help people when emergency calls come in. Well, that's exactly what happened here. Sarasota Sheriff tweeted out just a little while ago that if you have a situation where there is cardiac arrest or a hemorrhage or childbirth, they're trying to call. They're getting these emergency calls into their systems, into their 911 dispatch regularly. The medical director is then coming on and trying to guide that person through the emergency, but they cannot come to get you, which is such a large part of what we're talking about in terms of communities trying to both keep people safe but also having their hands tied given the urgency of the situation. Street I'm on right now, and because of technological difficulties, I'm a little bound by where I can walk. But down the street, you'll see that there are trees blowing back and forth, obviously water pouring off of awnings. We have seen heavy rainfall here. It's starting to accumulate in the street, not to the extent of a Naples or a Fort Myers yet, but we have hours to go in this process. This is an area, the record storm surge they had ever seen was a couple of years ago for Irma. That was in the 6 to 8 foot range. We could see something in the excess of that here for Hurricane Ian. And it's honestly hard to talk right now. We are also waiting to hear from Governor Ron DeSantis, who gave us a briefing about an hour and a half ago, spoke about the fact that there were hundreds of thousands of people without power. That figure now approaching 900,000 at last check. It may be higher as we've been trying to sort of get our bearings here. And in Sarasota County, where I am, the percentage of people without power at last check was about 4 out of 10, perhaps pushing 50%. So this is a process that's going to go on for a number of weeks in terms of power restoration. But right now, the thoughts of officials here are on making sure that those who are not in shelters are identifying authorities as to where they are, documenting it online. You can submit something, hopefully before you lose any sort of connectivity, and they can come and check on you after this passes. But right now, there's no such thing as going out in conditions like this and trying to help people. So clearly, that is at the forefront of everyone's mind right now. And then the rainfall. And the rainfall is going to become an issue, not just here in Southwest Florida, but all over the really I-4 corridor, guys, from Tampa all the way to Orlando. The projections are record-shattering 15 to 20, maybe 24 inches of rain. And this is an area that has been saturated before Hurricane Ian arrived. So you're looking at a really confluence of factors that's going to make this extremely trying in the days ahead. Again, normally one of the most popular parts of Sarasota around the corner is Main Street. I'm on State. lemon, orange. They have these picturesque names. It's a beautiful town.
I know
and it's
the
under
town.
siege at the moment. And we're going to keep tabs on where things go here.
Sam, thank you. I know Sarasota. It's a gorgeous place too, and there's a great farmers market there, right where Sam's standing. On the right side of your screen, I just want to flag that's Naples, Florida. We're getting this new video in. You've seen it on a loop here, but I think that's coming from Fire and Rescue. It looked like it was their facilities.
Yeah, and you can see the fire truck here, and we've been told they're not going out to try to help people. So this is water coming in to one of the fire vehicles there, we believe, at one of the stations. And this, I think, speaks to the difficulty that first responders are going to have in the hours and days to come. They've got to dry this thing out and make sure it's able to run before they can go out to try to help anybody. And the water is obviously waist deep.
Yeah. It's a really stunning video. Let's turn to Steve Patterson. He's in St. Petersburg, Florida.
And Steve has been there for us, sort of managing the site there. Steve, you're right on the coast, right near the water. Help us understand what you're seeing, what you're dealing with in that part of Florida.
Managing is a good word for it. We've got a good wind gust right now. It can be hard to concentrate when you get a good gust like this. These gusts have increased, I would say, over the last 30 minutes or so. Before, we had good sustained wind. Now is sustained wind along with a very violent gust. The rain has been in and out, bands of rain, of course. We're not in the area in which we would expect that deluge of rain that Sam was talking about, so dangerous, not only along that corridor, but really up and down the coast. And that includes Tampa. That includes really the entire Bay Area, including where I am in St. Petersburg. The estimate now is about a 4 to 6 foot storm surge when the tide comes back from the bay behind me. That will likely not be until the late hours of tonight. Maybe 8, 9 o'clock is when we expect that, when you can't see and when it's most dangerous. Police have done their best to try to secure all the roads. Squad cars we've seen try to clear people out, but it is shelter in place at this point. You cannot evacuate, you can't escape this, and it's only going to get a whole lot worse from here. Back to you.
All right, Steve Patterson for us on the Florida coast today. Steve, thank you.
That concludes our special coverage of Hurricane Ian. You can follow more live updates right now on NBC News Now.
We will have much more tonight on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt live from Florida. Thanks for joining us.
Live from Ukraine, from Uvalde, Texas, from Mayfield, Kentucky. To cover the news, you have to be in it. This is how so many towns and cities are protecting themselves. You can actually see they're pushing the gates open. Was there a school officer on campus? That's what we've been told. No. Do you remember any tornado as bad as this one? You look at this and you're thinking, we're not going to have power for weeks, if not months.
Exactly.
Every night, it's your news playlist.
Top Story with Tom Yamas. Weeknights at 7 on NBC News Now.
We're here to start conversations about the big things happening in our world, because it's not my job to tell you what to think. My job is to think about what you tell me.
Now Tonight with Joshua Johnson, streaming weeknights at 8 on NBC News Now.
Right now on NBC News Now.
As we come on the air, here's what we know.
It has been dramatic, powerful.
We begin with breaking news just coming in.
What's happening now, what's happening next, and what it means for you.
We're continuing to follow the Russian attack on Ukraine.
There's an intense artillery battle underway.
We're getting out of this area right now because more air raid sirens are sounding.
As we look out over the latest city-turned-crime scene, we see the things left behind.
Was there a school officer on campus? Because that's what we've been told.
No.
Fewer people are content to just offer their thoughts and prayers.
And the House has answered the call to create new gun laws.
The stunning testimony at the January 6th hearing on Capitol Hill.
Americans face the highest inflation rate in decades.
Parts of Virginia cleaning up after severe storms.
A terrifying night of flash floods.
Flames forcing thousands to evacuate.
When do I play meteorologist? Only when the heat is this bad.
Another special night of election coverage right here at NBC News Now.
Results are coming in.
This Tuesday is going to be huge for primary purposes.
It's an interesting race here. I've just never covered anything like it. This is big when we're talking about November.
How many doors do you think you've each knocked on?
This feels like an ideological fight to the death. Is there room for common ground on this issue?
What do you think when you see the activism that's happening right now? Do you think this movement could have happened without social media?
A lot to talk about as we continue our rolling coverage.
We're coming on the air with the news NBC scoop.
Bringing the news to you is not only a job, it's an honor.
It's the best time of the morning. Time for that pop start, baby.
I'm feeling the vibe today on the show.
Top story with Tom Llamas. Weeknights at 7 on NBC News Now.
As we look out over the latest city-turned crime scene, we see the things left behind. Back now with our NBC News exclusive.
Here's what's happening in your neck of the woods.
Hallie Jackson Now. Weekdays at 5 on NBC News Now. Now Tonight with Joshua Johnson. Streaming weeknights at 8 on NBC News Now.
I'm Chuck Todd. We're continuing our breaking news coverage of Hurricane Ian right now on NBC News Now. It's a massive storm. It made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane. It's one of the largest and most powerful storms to slam into the United States in recent memory, and Florida's had its share of monster storms. Ian now near the top of that list. Ian officially made landfall last hour near the town of Cayo Costa, Florida, and as Bill Cairns will tell you later, it's actually the second time Cayo Costa has seen a massive storm go over its little barrier island. As Ian moves further inland, winds are being measured now around 145 miles an hour. Just a few hours ago, winds were hitting 155 miles per hour, which is just technically 2 miles short of a Category 5 strength rating. Potentially, the biggest danger we're watching right now is from life-threatening storm surge. Forecasters are predicting as much as 18 feet of water in certain areas. That's anywhere from 2 to 3 times as much as these areas have ever gotten in storm surge in any previous storm. Currently, more than 800,000 people have lost power. That number probably will only grow. All day, we've been monitoring the storm surge in Naples. Take a look at how the waters have been rising there all afternoon. Over the span of about 3 hours, and we can show you this, we have seen it rise to the point of consuming entire vehicles. As you can see here, you just go through our little time lapse here, and you just watch the water level rise and rise and rise to the point where vehicles are almost entirely engulfed in water. The water is expected to continue to rise in the coming hours, though it has begun to slightly recede in the last few minutes. In addition to that storm surge, we have flash flooding concerns all over central Florida, as there is a forecast that this storm could slow to a crawl, and depending on how slow it goes will depend on how bad those potential flood warnings will turn out to be. Orlando could see as much as 24 inches of rain, in addition to tornadoes and near 100-mile-per-hour winds. My mother lives in Seminole County. It's an inland county. It's a landlocked county, and they're under a hurricane warning. They expect winds of more than 75 miles an hour sustained. So to give you a sense of just how massive this hurricane is, look at this graphic. So Hurricane Charlie devastated Florida in 2004. The actual size of the storm could fit inside Ian's eye, okay? Charlie could fit inside Ian's eye. That's how massive this storm is. Let's bring in MSNBC anchor Ali Velshi, whose camera in Naples has basically been telling us the story almost without words. You know, Ali, we can sit here and watch your camera, and we've been watching the cars, we've been watching the floating refrigerators. You've been watching that and more. Paint the picture, Ali.
Well, you know, Chuck, you know, I've known each other for a long time. Today was one of those few days where at one point I had just Randy, our photographer, just shoot it, and I didn't even talk while I was live on TV, because we understood things like storm surges that we talk about all the time, which most people think of flooding. We understood it differently. Here's that picture you were looking at earlier. A couple things to tell our viewers. So you're right, it has in the last few minutes started to recede, partially because 3:20 p.m. Eastern was high tide here. So at least we're now the actual tide is coming out where the surge is still going in. So you can see a line of water that's pushing in, but you can see after a few minutes it sort of eddies and starts to come back out again. Now we see another push of water in. So there's a surge versus the reversing tide. But there was a lineup of cars on the right and on the left. This is the parking lot of the hotel we're staying at. And those cars were all lined up like parked cars. And look at them all. The water just pushed them. They just floated away. Bill Cairns always tells us, you know, 6 inches of water can float your car, we had 5 feet of water here. And this is not even close to the water that we're seeing north of me, where we're still seeing 145-mile-per-hour winds and 12 to 18 feet of storm surge. This was 5-6 feet, something of that nature. Anyway, the point is it's not over. There's still a lot more. We actually just got the updated power outage numbers. Well over 1 million people in the state of Florida. There are 40,000 line workers, the electrical line workers, go up with those trucks to fix the line. They're standing by. They positioned. Every time there's a hurricane, everywhere you go, every time I travel to a hurricane, I see convoys of these trucks. They're ready to go. They're staying at motels and hotels around Florida. They're ready to go, but they can't until the wind drops down below 50 miles an hour and this water recedes, because there's debris and damage and stuff underneath this water that they can't do. And that's not going to be till probably tomorrow sometime. I'm going to ask Randy just to show you, now that the water has pulled back a lot, it's still a pretty rough Gulf of Mexico right now, and there's still virtually no beach to see. There's no sand, but you're starting to see the water level has come down. Again, there's still places in Florida, Chuck, that have it far worse than we do at this point, but we are starting to feel like we're on the other side of this thing, or at least getting
I was
to
just
it.
going to
Still
say,
gonna be a rough
though,
night for a lot of people, Chuck.
I was just going to say, you're on the dirty side of this storm, though, aren't you? So this is not going to be an easy night, I don't think. I mean, I hope it is for your sake, Allie, but
it's not. And look,
the dirty side, yeah.
You just saw it pick up again, right? This is right. So this happens, right? You get gusts, you get fans, and I'm leaning over here, and you can just hear the wind in my mic, right? It's an entirely different experience because I'm sitting in a relatively sheltered area. But as you know, Chuck, the water's always more dangerous than the wind in most typical American hurricanes. And what I'm seeing now, when I look at those carports underneath those places across, they were up to the top in the last hour.
Yeah.
Now you've got 3.5 feet below it. So that part of the risk is starting to diminish. But you're absolutely right. It is not over. There's many hours of this hurricane left, and it's still dangerous. And it just, we can maybe start to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
We just don't want people to get out. I mean, that's the thing. Don't think this event is over down there anyway. And now you know why so many Florida houses put the first floor of their house above the garage. This is the reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
All right, Allie Belshi.
And by the way, there are mandatory evacuations like where we are now. There are curfews. The authorities are very clear. On your phone, you get these alerts that say shelter in place. Nobody's supposed to be going anywhere right now. Wait this thing out wherever you are. Stay safe. Exactly.
You don't have a Randy with you or an Allie Belshi. If I had Randy and Allie, I know I'd be safe. I know how Randy is. That's the guy I want on my crew any day of the week. Anyway, tell him hello for me.
That's right.
All right, let me move up the coast from Naples to Steve Patterson, who's in St. Petersburg, Florida. And perhaps St. Pete has dodged a bullet. Steve, what do you see there? Look, they're not getting a direct hit, but you're getting, obviously, some tough weather. What are you seeing?
Unequivocally, we've dodged a bullet here. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we were expecting a direct landfall. We were expecting the eye of the storm to be here by now. Now you can see people walking behind me. Not to say that the wind event hasn't been incredible already. And already we're hearing reports of trees down, of power lines down, about 100,000 customers without power as we speak. In not only this county, but about 3 counties that make up Tampa Bay. As you see people curious here along the shoreline. Mandatory evacuation orders, I should say, underway here as well. People should not be out here. And if they are, they cannot leave this area because now the wind event, the rain event is moving in. And this is not the worst of it, Chuck. We expect about 7, 8, 9 o'clock or so to when we get that real surge, not only off the coast, but the storm surge as well. As the tide has been receding, it will come back in. We expect about 4 to 6 feet of storm surge. It's not as much as we're getting in the eye of the storm, but 4 to 6 can be quite a bit when you're talking about an area like Tampa Bay, where there are low-lying properties. So the potential for obviously flooding, flash flooding, very high, and the potential damage that can be done even in this initial wind event, high as well. Especially with the damage that can be done, with trees and power lines down and police not able to get to those areas until this is over. Potentially very dangerous and extremely windy as we speak, Chuck.
I can tell, and I was just going to say, I'm going to let you go and get out of that wind right now. Steve Patterson in St. Petersburg, Florida. Steve, thank you. Let me bring in NBC News meteorologist Samara Theodore to get the latest on this path of the hurricane. And Samara, actually, My biggest question is, how long is this thing going to sit on the peninsula? I say that because I got a mom in Seminole County, just northeast of Orlando, and that's what they're bracing for.
Exactly. So it's getting ready to move in their direction, and it should be arriving as we head into throughout Thursday. So Orlando's going to start to see their symptoms from this storm really revving up as we head through the next couple of hours, and we anticipate it really taking its time meandering to the northeast at 9 miles per hour. But we're going to start seeing this slowing down even further. So it's going to be at least 24 to 48 hours before it's really clear of Central Florida, and you'll see on the map coming up here that we could see this linger into parts of Savannah through the end of the week. So here's a look right now at Ian. Just look at the gravity of this storm, how big it is. It's really encompassing all of southern Florida right now. And as we go through time, you can see all the lightning around the eye, and that's just a signifier of how strong the storm is. You don't see that with a lot of hurricanes unless they're major hurricanes. So the latest coming in, it's still carrying that Cat 4 status until we get that next update. Like I said, moving to the northeast at 9 miles per hour. Currently, right now, you're starting to see that eye really concave, get smaller and shrink, but do not be deceived. We are still seeing this pack a punch with the Cat 4 winds closest to the eye. So here's the latest on Doppler radar right now. So we have it spinning, and it's Port Charlotte that's seeing the strongest winds getting ready to move into the eye. We still have that surge coming into areas like Sanibel down here with the southern portion of the storm pushing that water inland, and then we are getting visuals of very bad flooding occurring in areas like Fort Myers. Along I-75, things are quiet between Fort Myers and Punta Gorda, but that won't be for much longer. And here, where we see this level of reflectivity, deep reds and pinks, that is extremely heavy rain. We're talking copious amounts of rain being dropped right now in areas like Venice and Sarasota. It does lighten up the farther north you head into Tampa.
Right.
But because it is going to be sticking around for some time, we are anticipating that flooding to start to pick up, Chuck. And so that's going to be the next thing we're looking at.
All right, Samara, I got a bunch of questions. Let me start with the storm surge risk down there below where the eye came in. We know there's going to be a delayed storm surge. When do we know the worst of that surge? When do they know they'll be out of the woods or the worst of the surge? Is it another 3 hours, another 6 hours? What's your estimate?
Well, we still have high tide. That's going to occurring in some of those areas farther south near Fort Myers, another high tide around 6:45 p.m.
Okay.
So in all honesty, I would really not even clear us until tomorrow morning. We're going to wait till we see those final totals coming in. So with the storm starting to kind of quiet down, you don't want to go outside still, Truck.
All right, so there's that. Is this going to be a hurricane the entire time it's in the state of Florida? Like it's going to, we think it won't get weaker than 76 miles an hour.
Well, I think we are going to see that weakening take place, but to your point, it is going to keep and sustain that strength well inland. So we're looking at Cat 3 in Sarasota Wednesday night, tonight at 8 p.m. And then look at this, Orlando could still, or just shy of south of Orlando, we could still be seeing at least Cat 1 hurricane force. It's not until it gets to the eastern side where we actually see that turn into a tropical storm force wind scenario. So yes, this is a very strong storm. Even historically speaking, Chuck, we're looking at a very strong storm.
And the chances this thing can sort of get its eye back together when it hits the Atlantic. I mean, it doesn't look like it's going to sit there long, but how concerned should folks on the southeast coast be?
Well, we aren't expecting this to re-strengthen into a hurricane again. However, it's still going to maintain some level of structure. And because of that, it'll still be a tropical storm. And we're anticipating those in Savannah and Charleston to still get a pretty heavy hit by Friday night into the weekend. We're not really going to see this diminish into remnants until we head into Saturday. And that's well into the Carolinas.
And how wet? Do we expect this storm to be super wet after it does that second? I mean, are we looking at flooding issues in North Carolina? I mean, that's a state that deals with flooding a lot, even with some minor tropical storms.
Absolutely. With this type of system, especially along the coastline in South Carolina, we could be looking at some flash flooding occurring with this system, especially because it's moving so slow. That's really where the issue is coming in.
Just an astonishing storm and an astonishing amount of destruction that it's about to take shape. Anyway, Samara, thank you so much for all of that and for humoring me and all of my questions. I'm going to move down to Sarasota, where earlier this afternoon the city's mayor said he expects his city will get a direct hit in the coming hours. So I'm joined now by the Sarasota County Emergency Management Director, Ed McCrane. And Ed, I know you're in the middle of this, so let's not pretend you have, I'm not going to pretend you have many of these answers, but what kind of shape is the county in right now? What kind of, what's the best estimate you have on power, water, things like that?
Well, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it. Yeah, we're just now starting to see this in the South County because it made landfall, Cayo Costa, and went into Fort Myers and Charlotte Harbor. And we have the town of Inglewood, which is in part in Charlotte County, and the north part of it is in Sarasota. So I know right now it's affecting Port Charlotte. I have a sister in Northport. It's affecting her. They're out of power. So I think everything south of Northport to the water is going to be out of power. And as the storm trajects itself, continues to move north, that power outages are going to, be increasing. We have Florida Power and Light representatives in the EOC. We can actually ask them regularly what the status is. But are you running on?
Are you running on emergency power, or are you running on regular power right now?
Well, we went to generator power when we locked down, and
Gotcha.
the reason we did that was because we can run 100 hours on generator, and that we don't have that fluctuation and disruptions if we do have power outages, because we have an automatic transfer switch, so power comes off, they go on, and vice versa. So our technicians, we have an electrician, the generator repair guys are here in the EOC with us, and they can go deploy if something happens. We have 2 generators that run simultaneously. If we lose one, we can still operate.
What about your water situation? I know I have a staffer who's got a relative in Sarasota, and I guess water shut down yesterday at some point.
Only on the areas being evacuated. So
Gotcha.
Because they're barrier islands and they move, our utility folks with the storm surge threat had to shut down the water, and the cities do the same thing. So the water out to Siesta and Casey Key and then Lido and say Longboat, the utility guys shut those off. They also shut down the wastewater system. And then it takes 12 hours to re-energize that. You got to do some boil water testing. So that's the reason for that. But those people that don't have water, the homes that don't have water are homes that should not have anybody in them right now.
And that's
in the evacuation area.
And that's my final question for you. Florida every year gets a lot of new residents. I've always will consider myself a Floridian, even when I don't live there. But there's a lot of people that have never experienced something like this. Have you noticed, are residents heeding your warnings, or are you having a hard time convincing people to take this seriously?
Well, we had Hurricane Irma in 2017, and we learned a lot of lessons. We had 20,000 people. We only had 4 pet-friendly shelters, so now we opened them 4 at a time. We ended up opening 13. So now we open 12 simultaneously, and I expected there to be 15, 20,000 people because the A and the B and the mobile homes is about 160,000 people.
Yeah.
And last night I had a gaggle of reporters that are sleeping here overnight. They wanted a little press conference. I asked my staff, can you get me the numbers that are in the shelter? Because they're going to ask me that. At 8 o'clock last night, I had 1,750.
Okay.
We have 12 shelters, capacity of over 30,000. I was like, well, that can't be right. So all night and all day, we've been trying to figure out a way to get more people. So where did they go? Did they leave the area? Did they heed our warnings and go to friends or family? Or did they just stay home and not go to the shelter because they were looking at the timing and thought they had extra time?
Right.
So today we're up to 4,400 because overnight we did one of those like Amber Alert, wireless emergency alert for to the citizens. We have 500 pets. We got, people starting to still show up as long as they can, but warn them at some point they won't be able to travel and they need a shelter in place.
Well, especially since the storm surge we haven't gotten through the risk of that. Ed McCrane, Emergency Management Team for Sarasota County. Ed, appreciate the time and information you gave us, and we'll be checking back in. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Our live breaking news coverage of this monstrous storm that is hitting the state of Florida will continue in a moment as we follow these conditions, the catastrophic damage, and this overwhelming storm surge from Hurricane Ian. And as we go to break, take a look at what it was like. This is aboard the NOAA plane. This is a research plane that goes through eye walls of hurricanes to get more information. Well, check this one out when it went through Ian's eye wall.
There goes the fence. Holy cow. Oh!
Tonight, I interviewed Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg about the ongoing delays. You seem to be pointing the finger at the airlines. They're pointing the finger back. Mr. Secretary, when is this going to get better?
NBC News, streaming free now. The day's biggest political stories with trusted insight now and expert analysis now. A daily look at the politics behind the headlines. Meet the Press Now, streaming weekdays at 4 p.m. on NBC News Now.
No stress, no mess, just yum.
That's it.
Sometimes the news can be difficult and overwhelming for kids to understand.
Ukraine and Russia. Could you help me understand what's going on?
So to help make sense of it all, we've created a newscast just for them. We hope your family will watch Nightly News Kids Edition.
NBC News, streaming free now. Hallie Jackson Now, weekdays at 5 on NBC News Now.
Here's what's happening in your neck of the woods.
Internal Affairs, the new podcast from Dateline. Listen now.
It's the best time in the morning. Time for that pop start, baby.
I'm feeling the vibe today on the show.
As we look out over the latest city turned crime scene, the things left behind.